Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us in today's session, where we discuss IMT's Voter Registry solutions. With us today, we're joined by Brian Eckhardt, the CEO of IMT. He's serving as the Managing Director for IMT's Elections Solutions. Also with us today is Tim Kist, the Managing Director of TK3 Consulting. Tim has worked with the IMT team for several years now in the e-government space, helping create new solutions for our customers. My name is Tyson Carter. I'm the Manager of Client Education and Communications at IMT, and I'll be serving as today's host. Without further ado, we'll turn things over to Brian. Brian?
I just want to say thank you to everyone attending today and taking the time to learn more about our voter registry solution. The demonstration should take about 50 minutes, and that'll allow us for questions at the end. And it's, of course, our hope you'll want to see more, and we're really happy to arrange a one-on-one demonstration to have a deeper dive with one of our solutions engineers after that if you'd like to get a hold of us. As our tagline says, we're identity solutions experts, and, simply put, what that means is we've focused on a niche for over 23 years. Deployed well over 150 secure registries for applications such as the client and provider registries that pin up most of the electronic health records in Canada, health provider management registries for life sciences, taxation registries, and, in the law enforcement area and insurance, persons of interest and fraud applications. E-government is a new area, and voter registry is one part of it, and we're very excited to go through that today with you. Now, we are an IBM Gold Business Partner, and for a lot of our solutions, we use the IBM Identity Engines. Now, inside IBM, these are known as the InfoSphere Master Data Management Engine and the InfoSphere Identity Insights Engine. We've been working with these for over 15 years, and they're recognized by Gartner Group and many others as leaders in linking and matching technologies. The voter registry solution, we're always interested in expanding into adjacent industry solutions that leverage what we do and what we know well. And the voter registry solution that we're presenting to you today is one of them. We've spent, we being Tim and I, about 18 months, doing market research, talking to elections agencies, trying to understand the business. And we really hope that what you'll see today is how what we've come up with for a registry allows you to efficiently build a permanent voters list, establish the relationships you need quickly, deploy workflows and business processes, manage integrity, data governance, and data stewardship, and easily deploy new applications on mobile and cloud platforms. If you'd like to learn more about us, you can go to our website. Under About Us, you'll see a more in-depth presentation that you can take in. And now I'm going to spend a few minutes outlining the business challenges and drivers for the voter registry solution, and Tim and I will both be doing that together. Let's first talk about what we're going to cover today. And, the foundation of every democratic election process is to know your voters. But before we go into describing our solution, we wanted to share with you what elections agencies we've talked to in North America have told us are the challenges and drivers they're focusing on related to this know your voters. As people on this call are well aware, there are a lot of stakeholder groups involved in what most of the public and often many in government believe to be a simple process of let's just take a vote. And these stakeholder groups have a complex and diverse range of requirements. We've certainly come to understand that the elections business is extremely complex and involved, and that elections don't just happen every 4 years. The other thing we've learned is every agency we've spoken to is somewhat unique. When it comes to know your voter, though, all election organizations we've talked to have shared some core business objectives. The first is to create and maintain a high-quality register of electors. And that's to support the administration of enumerations, to support elections, referenda, and recall and initiative events. They also need to provide timely and accurate electoral information to stakeholders at designated points in the election cycle, and produce reports and statistics with a high degree of integrity for use in measuring elections indicators such as elections cost, voter participation rate, and making recommendations going forward. To achieve these objectives, there's a certain information you have to know about your population, and you have to know that with a high degree of accuracy. You have to be able to uniquely resolve every person's identity, unambiguously and only once, across many disparate government systems and databases. You need to know where people reside, and that is a determination for most government elections agencies. Note that reside is key, not where they work, not where they receive mail or spend time in the summer, and it's trickier than it looks. And you need to know they're eligible to vote on election day based upon the rules of the governing election body, which includes age, citizenship, residency, and sometimes a period of time lived at that residency. It all sounds simple on the surface, but as we know, it's deceptively difficult in practice. So let's quickly go over some of the main Know Your Voter challenges, and I'll hand it off now to Tim.
Thanks, Brian. First challenge to maintaining an accurate voter list is that our population is highly mobile and constantly changing. We know that we've got somewhere between 20 and 30%, according to Canada Post, up to 4 million people that move each year, and that includes both internal and external migration. Stats Canada validates that by saying about 20% of people move within Canada. We also have about 400,000 people graduating and turning 18 each year. This makes them eligible to vote, and this is a number we obtained from the Elections Canada website. We've also got about 300,000 people that die each year in Canada, and this is also according to Elections Canada. We've got about 180,000 people that become Canadian citizens each year, according to the Government of Canada immigration statistics. And finally, although it is difficult to quantify, there is a significant number of Canadians who are disenfranchised in some way from the elections process. The second challenge is that people don't think about elections very much outside of the actual elections period, 30 to 45 days rather, every few years. There's a general lack of knowledge around the elections process. A United States National Council of State Legislatures study found that about 1 in 4 Americans believe that if they move, election officials or the U.S. Postal Service automatically update their registration. Now, I know that this is a U.S. study, but we believe the results would be materially the same in Canada. In fact, 8% of people that want to vote on election day in Canada are not on the national list of electors on voting day. Another U.S. study by the Pew Research Center that is currently being cited by the U.S. White House in substantiating their claims of widespread voter fraud showed that 1 in 8 registrations are inaccurate. And as someone who has met the author of the study, David Becker, he was with Pew, he's now with the Center for Election Innovation and Research. It's important to point out that 1 in 8 registrations are inaccurate, not 1 in 8 people voted fraudulently. Elections agencies have solid processes in place for both election day and advance polls to make sure this does not happen. But given the challenges we just reviewed, it is not hard to see why it is difficult to maintain a voter list with a high degree of accuracy and integrity. Another study conducted by Caltech found that the enumeration and registration costs can comprise up to 30% of the election cost. Looking at Canadian elections organizations seems to support this finding, with registration costs ranging from 20 to 30% from the financial reports we were able to examine. Based upon our experiences in other industries, we believe that our voter registry solution can help elections organizations reduce this cost significantly. You'll see also that when Elections Canada stopped its enumeration program, it claimed savings of $8 million per election, and Saskatchewan is expecting to save some $900,000 every 4 years as it moves towards a permanent voter list. Now, let's spend a couple of minutes on what we have heard from elections organizations that their business drivers are. First, better insights to increase funding. It's a common theme that we've heard from pretty much all elections organizations we've spoken to, and it's the need to raise the profile of the elections process to secure more funding. Elections organizations are somewhat uniquely funded, and that is the autonomy and independence from government. So it's part of the legislature in Canada and the Secretary of State in the US. It often comes with the cost of having to lobby and advocate for increased funding. Elections agencies are looking for better analytics and more evidence-based outcomes to support these efforts. Enhancing the voter experience. This is a new business driver in the past decade that's trying to address the changing expectations of voters who are prepared and willing to try registering online to vote or to vote at any polling station. Electronic poll books are facilitating this in the U.S. In Santa Fe, New Mexico, for example, voters can now show to voting centers, super centers on election day, where they are checked in with an electronic poll book and their custom ballot is printed out for them. Another driver is increasing voter participation. Elections organizations are very focused on outreach, education, and awareness programs, which are becoming more and more critical for new young voters, alienated voters, and the disenfranchised population. Operational flexibility. We've heard that legislation, policy, and regulations are changing at an increasing rate. This requires election agencies to produce more real-time information and manage new processes such as objections, investigations, and information requests in a timely and equitable manner. We see elections organizations looking at new ways to do things to reduce operations costs. And the last driver is voter fraud. One of the most contentious issues we've run into speaking to elections agencies is the issue of voter fraud. From what we have heard, we side with elections organizations that it is in fact a much smaller issue than many make of it, but the real business driver is being able to have governance processes and the right tools to show due diligence. It's the proof, if you will. So, against the backdrop of these challenges and business drivers that we've outlined, we'll now go over the IMT Voter Registry solution. And there's 5 key components that make up the Voter Registry solution. An identity engine to resolve and relate people, locations, and organizations. This uses the advanced matching algorithms in the highly acclaimed IBM Master Data Management Platform. The identity engine ingests registration event data from multiple departments and uniquely and unambiguously resolves the identity of every individual once and only once across government. This is what we call a 360 view of a person, and then relates these identities to each other. For example, here relating 3 individuals to one household. A stewardship application to enforce governance and maintain data integrity. This stewardship application allows data stewards to quickly visualize and act on data integrity issues the identity engine detects, such as a voter having a residence in more than one riding, or a voter who is claiming to be eligible to vote on election day, potentially not being 18 years of age. A business process and notifications manager. This is a powerful way to quickly build and deploy new workflows and business processes using a visual design tool. For example, dealing with an objection by a voter on their voting status. And there is a workbench application. This is a powerful way to quickly build and deploy new workflows and business processes using a visual design tool. For example, dealing with an objection by a voter on their voting status. And finally, the web services and interfaces that are in part of the solution. The voter registry provides a powerful web services that enable the rapid development and deployment of external applications such as a mobile electronic poll book or the ability to register to vote online. So, now let's take a closer look at the actual registry software and how each of these components support an elections organization and deals with our newly arrived family, the Andersons. As Brian said earlier, to battle the law of demos, we are using screenshots, but they are from an actual working registry. Brian, over to you.
Thanks, Tim. So I'm going to spend the rest of this presentation or webinar demonstrating the actual voter registry software. As Tim said, I'm going to use a typical family scenario throughout the demo. I find finding a family and following them through makes the demonstration more relevant and meaningful. We have the Anderson family, and aren't they a cute bunch? We've got the dad, Tyler, the mom, Mackenzie, and the son, Tucker. It's summertime in our demo. They moved to the province about 3 months ago in the spring. Tyler, the father, was born in the province, but he's been away for over 20 years. Tucker is 17. He's enrolled to start university in the fall and turns 18 in September. And finally, we have an election, a general election at the provincial level scheduled for the 3rd week in October. Now remember, everything I'm going to show you, the person identification data, is completely fictitious. I made it up. We did use publicly available information for constituencies and addresses, and in fact, you'll see Manitoba data at times where we found that the information was publicly available. In terms of how we set up the registry for the demo, we've got 5 registration sources feeding the registry. We've got an education source, Department of Motor Vehicles, Elections Canada, Department of Health, and Vital Stat. Education is also using a part of our solution called Resolve ID, which I'm going to demonstrate. The Elections Agency has a portal on their website that allows folks to register directly with them. And they're also using the data stewardship application to create and update voters as well as they receive perhaps paper-based registrations or information to update. So, let's get started. This is what the main login screen to the stewardship application looks like. It's the application I'm going to use the most to demonstrate to you. I find it's the most visually powerful. Let's start by showing you how the voter registry builds a permanent voter list from the data it receives from different departments. Now I'm going to log in here as admin, and when I log in as an administrator, I default to the search screen for a voter. One of the more powerful features of the identity engine is the search capabilities. Throughout the searches I'm going to do today in this demonstration, I'm not going to get a single one correct. I'm going to reverse names, I'm going to make spelling mistakes, I'm going to reverse digits and numbers, and I'm doing this because I want to show you that the identity engine will still find the correct person because of the sophisticated matching algorithms in it. The analogy is that the identity engine works a lot like a Google search and finds the most likely candidate. It's extremely useful for applications such as making the registry available to the public so that they can query and find out where they have to vote or who their candidates are. They don't have to get the search criteria perfect. I'll search for Tyler this time with the whole name inputted into the last name field, as you can see. Okay, our search has found Tyler Anderson, and we can see he's already in the registry. And we can see that an elections record has been created for him. That's shown in the red box. The elections record was created for Tyler because we received data from 3 other registration events. He first registered at the Department of Health and got his health card. Then he went to the DMV and got his license. And because he was born in the province, the identity engine also found his Vital Stats birth record and linked that to him. Now, looking at data quality, we can see in the orange or yellow boxes that there was a transposition error made on his phone number at DMV. And for some reason, when he went to health, they did find his existing record with his existing identifier, but his new address was not updated. Instead, it is still showing his last address where he lived in the province about 20 years ago. Now, despite these errors in the incoming registration data, the voter registry still linked them all together because of the strong probabilistic matching algorithm. But the question then becomes, how do these data errors from DMV and health impact the data quality of the elections record that was created? So let me switch to what we call the enterprise view to show this. This is what we call the enterprise view. This is your elections record that was created by the voter registry from the other incoming data. Now, by default, the enterprise view is created from the most recent data updated by any source. When Tyler went to health, which was his first event, the registry received that data, realized this is a new person, created a record for the elections people, and then he went to DMV. Because that was the order he went in, you can see that the address is correct, but the phone number is not. Now, you can create as many of these custom enterprise views as you want, and in fact, most of our clients do. They usually create something I would call here an elections enterprise view, where if someone now registered with the elections people directly, either in person or online, depending on the process, then that data would update their record and would usually take precedence on the other source data that came in. I've got an example of that later. You can also see that when the elections record was created, an elections identifier was assigned by the identity engine. Under source ID on the left-hand side, you'll see the ID, the number 374, and so on. Now, the identity engine can create the unique lifetime identifier for you, or, and is typically more the case, it can use an identifier already in use by the elections agency. And finally, you can see that we've configured some key attributes for each voter on the right-hand side of the screen. We've got one for previously voted in an election in the province, is eligible to vote in the next election, is registered to vote in the 2017 election, and is checked in to vote in the 2017 general election, which is kind of a proxy for did vote. You can see that although the elections record was created, it was not created directly with the elections agency, so we've not set the registered to vote flag, and you can set that up any way you want. But it does show he's eligible to vote. How did that happen? Well, for the purposes of our demonstration, we went into that workbench configuration tool, and we set up business rules that said, if a record exists of a previous vote in the province, which it did, and proof of Canadian citizenship exists, which the Vital Stats birth record was deemed sufficient, and the person is over 18 on election day and a resident for 90 days, which we can confirm from the DMV and health records, then confer eligibility to vote in the 2017 election. Now, at this point, a notification can be sent to Tyler to register to vote, and you have a couple of options for data integrity. When you get the record from Tyler direct to registration or to the elections agency, you can assume all the information collected is correct and use that as the authoritative record, or you can have the identity engine identify data integrity errors and create tasks for data stewards to follow up on. And I'll cover that off very shortly. I'm going to take a quick detour here and talk a bit about configuration. We mentioned the workbench application. With the limited demo time we have, I'm going to primarily focus on showing this registry through the stewardship application. The workbench application is very comprehensive. It's for people who configure the registry, and this is what one of the main screens look like. 80% of what you want to do with the registry can be done via configuration using the workbench, including defining the views of the data you want, defining the sources you're going to bring in, setting attributes like eligible to vote, setting up roles for security, views, reports. It takes a lot of time to demonstrate Workbench properly and really requires that one-on-one demo that I mentioned with a systems engineer. Something that we'd love to do. But here are a couple of screens that show you kind of what it looks like. This is how you would set up an event. It looks very much, for people who are familiar with an Eclipse application, it is basically that kind of an interface. So let me bounce back into the data stewardship application, and let's look at the mother, Mackenzie Anderson, now. I'm going to skip the search step on this one in the interest of time, and we see that she's also in the voter registry because source records were provided from Elections Canada and Health. You can also see the record came in from Elections Canada first, and then we subsequently got a record from Health with a different date of birth. And note that the elections record created for the organization has the date of birth from Elections Canada, even though the Health record is more recent with a different date of birth. So as I said, where we have people creating different enterprise views, what's been done in this example, we've configured the registry so that any records from an elections agency take precedence over other sources, even if they're more recent. You can actually configure the registry right down to just a specific field or attribute for a source to take precedence. So, what's going to happen in this case? We've configured the registry to create an exception for the data integrity condition, and we're going to create a task that I'll show you later that a data steward has to look at to examine and investigate the fact that a date of birth has come in from Health that's different from elections. Notice also that the eligibility has not been set for the Mother Mackenzie because she's not registered to vote with elections yet, has not lived in the province previously, but at this point the elections organization can contact her if they wish. They could wait for her to register, or they have the information needed now to contact her and make her aware of the elections process and have her register to vote. Finally, let's search now and bring up the son, Tucker Anderson. Now here, if you notice, I'm going to reverse the first and last names and actually put Anderson Tucker into the search. And I've made a spelling error on his email under Tucker, T-U-C-K-A-R. But the identity engine's still going to find him because there's sufficient data that is correct on the probability side to bring up the right record. So here we see Tucker is in the voter registry as a result of registering with Health and Education. In the circle in red, you can notice he's currently 17 years old, but he will be 18 at the time of the next election. So you can go into the registry, into that workbench configuration tool, and you can set up a notification, and this information can be provided now to an outreach and education group in the elections organization to contact Tucker and tell him he needs to vote. I'll show how you can generate a report in a moment. The other interesting thing I want to point out that we did for this demo is if we look at the enterprise view, the elections record for Tucker, there's something interesting here. Although Tucker has never lived in this province and he's only 17, it shows he's eligible to vote in the 2017 election in October. And of course, the question is, well, how did this happen? He's not contacted elections directly, and along with residency and age, there's still the requirement that he has to assert he's a Canadian citizen. How do we do that? The answer is the use of a component we've developed for the voter registry called Resolve ID. It's a difficult one to explain, but if you think of Resolve ID, it's a process automation widget. It's something that you can actually place on top of another department or organization's application registration screens and allow you to collect more data. That's assuming, of course, you've got an agreement with that department. So here you can see that at the university, they have a rather old legacy student registration system. The elections agency has created an agreement with the university to say, can we collect a couple of extra pieces of information from students who register with you in person? Now, once the university goes through their screens to collect the information it needs for the registration, which would include name, address, date of birth, and so on, the last step prior to the university completing their registration is to populate the Resolve ID window that the elections agency has provided. And really, the window is asking the student 2 additional questions that would determine eligibility and would capture these assertions. Are you a resident of this address? Are you a Canadian citizen? And then they can click Submit to Elections. Now, this window can be brought forward with a keyboard shortcut, It can be configured to automatically come forward when a particular field is exited or a button is pushed, or it can float on top of the other application all of the time. When the University Registrar clicks the Submit to Elections button, the Resolve ID widget collects all of the registration data from the university screen it needs and the Resolve ID screen assertions and sends all of that data to the voter registry. Now, because Tucker answered yes to both questions, you've got residency, you've got age, and you've got citizenship. So the voter registry would automatically confer eligibility to vote. You can also add things like signatures and biometrics to the Resolve ID widget if you want a stronger process. And again, we may or may not have it right. Every elections agency we've talked to has a slightly different way of doing their processes, but in the demo that we've created, we've said even though he has been deemed eligible to vote because we've, sort of ascertained that criteria, we're not setting the flag that he is registered to vote because we're still looking for him to contact elections and fill in a form online or assert his intention to vote. Now let's go over how the voter registry does relationships, which is one of the more interesting pieces of how the registry works. This is another view in the stewardship application, and if you look at the tab that's been circled in red now, this is called the relationships view. I've still got Tucker Anderson up in the stewardship application, but now we're going to look at the relationships that the registry creates between people, addresses, constituencies, polling stations, and candidates. Using this relationship view, we can see that Tucker has a residence. Here it doesn't quite, it's in Assiniboia and we can't quite see it unless I were to double click on it. But if you were, or to mouse over it a little more, it would show you the address. His postal code is R2Y0T1. So if I were to double click on Tucker's address, it would be like pivoting in a spreadsheet. If I double click on address, what I'm going to see then is all of the other residents of that physical address or household, if you will. All of these relationships are built dynamically as data comes in from the registration sources, and all of that relationship data is available via reports, notifications, or the web services and APIs. We can also see here now that this address is part of the Assiniboia constituency, that all three people at that address are in that constituency. And I could now pivot on the constituency. Pivoting on the constituency, you can now see that there are only two candidates currently registered to run in this constituency, Michael Kurtz and Maria Shan. They're also citizens and they're also in the registry as voters. And you can see via the little cloud that there are 1,297 addresses in this constituency. Pretty hard to show 1,297 addresses individually on this, so they're put into a little cloud. But if you were to click on the cloud, you would see that what would happen is it would expand and show you this window where you can now see all 1,297 addresses. And notice they have a unique ID number, each address. I'm going to explain more about that ID number in a moment. If you were to double click on one of these addresses now, it would go back to the household view, who would show you the voters in every one of the addresses. When you have 1,297 addresses, this isn't the easiest way to inspect the data. So let's assume now that a candidate has come forward and said they would like to have a list of all their voters in their constituency who have registered to vote. We've configured a report in the Workbench application to take the addresses for that constituency, link the voters who have that registered to vote flag set, and run the report for the candidate. It is quite simply a configuration to make it a report that can be on demand, that can be generated at a specific time, or that can be requested. So, here's the PDF report that you might give to a candidate to say, here are the people in your constituency and your address. Now, I do want to go back to this unique ID for a moment, because one of the things we've learned from talking to elections people is addresses are very important. Addresses are not attributes of people. Addresses are identities. The address is what determines what constituency it's in, and it just is a relationship of people live in addresses. So every address in the registry is given a unique ID, and it is mastered as kind of an identity in and of itself. We've also heard that it is very important, to be able to support the Geo-Coordinates capability. We have that built into the registry, and here you can see that we have an ESRI source, and we're using the ESRI unique ID for our address ID. So for boundary changes, or for determining constituencies, or who's in what constituency or polling area, we can import from ESRI or any other geo-type application that information and build the relationships. Another important feature of the registry is that we have address standardization, so we can take addresses that come in, using that algorithm, that matching engine, link them to Canada Post standards, and do the address standardization and store that in a standard format in the registry, either in an election source or, if you want it, in its own Canada Post source. One final feature of the registry I want to point out that's really important is that the identity engine keeps all of the records it receives. And here, if you look at the tab, we're now looking at someone called Judy Johnstone. If we have a tab called Attribute History, the identity engine keeps all of the records it receives. It keeps all history, and it audits and logs every change. So that really provides an important capability that we can support that respects kind of privacy by design principles, which says you can always go back to a specific point in time and see what the state of each source system record was and what that put together enterprise view looked like. That can be very important in the case of an objection, an audit, or perhaps an investigation. I want to go over some of the governance and data stewardship enforcement capabilities. Up to now, I've been logged in as an admin, and as you can see, I could see pretty much all of the data. The registry is a very secure security model, and all configuration is driven by roles. Now I'm going to log in as we've created a role of returning officer, and if I log in as a returning officer now, I'm going to do a search again for Tyler Anderson. This time I'm going to put in 58 Gibraltar Bay instead of 52, but because I have the postal code and the name's right, it's still going to find Tyler. But now when you go to that records view, you see as a returning officer, the returning officer can only see that enterprise view or that elections record. They don't have the ability to see the individual source records from health or education or Elections Canada. They can't see those voting attributes like are they eligible to vote, have they registered to vote, or any activity date. And we've also configured this role so that if they search for people who are not in their returning area, those searches would not be returned even if it finds a person. The configuration capability around roles is very extensive, and the goal really is to enforce whatever governance or information exchange protocols are determined and required. The other area of the stewardship application is tasks, where data integrity issues are dealt with. Now, typically with this type of registry, there's a data stewardship group, and they're responsible for maintaining data integrity in the registry. The identity engine is automatically going to create tasks for review when it detects a data integrity issue. And here you see a large list of tasks. Under MDM admin, we see them all. And the type of tasks that you see typically are a potential duplicate, where it's suspected that a person is in the election source twice, a potential linkage, where it's suspected that a record should be linked to a person, but the identity engine is asking for a steward to review first because the scores are very close. And then there's also fraud-related type tasks, such as review identifiers, where the identity engine can detect if two people are using the same identifiers, or if one person's trying to change the identity data on a record so that it looks significantly like another person. Now, tasks can be assigned to specific users, and you can assign specific types of tasks. For example, here I've assigned records that belong all to one specific constituency to this person I named MDM Default. When this person logs into the data stewardship application, you can see on the top tab there, they would go to their inbox, and they would see that there are tasks assigned to them that they are to review and resolve. This is what a potential duplicate screen looks like, and a data steward would review the case and decide whether they want to merge the two records. As you can see, you can visually inspect the two records with red and green. Red is showing what data is different, green is showing what data is the same. The other approach that people often use in this case is the data stewards might take the potential duplicate case, create a report, and send it back to the system they got it from, asking them to review the case and make the determination. Ultimately, whether the data steward makes the determination or the other source, should the source make it and send the record updated, it'll get cleaned up in the registry. If the registry makes it, it can send a message back to the source to say this is what we did. This is what a potential linkage screen looks like. Now, the difference here is that the two records are from different sources, and the identity engine is not asking if the two records should be merged, but instead asking if they should be linked. You can see at the top, the two records from DMV and Vital Stats have been linked together, and the engine says that's the same person. But it's looking at a third record from elections and saying it believes that this person is the same person, but is asking a data steward to look and make a final determination in order to decide whether it should be linked together or not. And again, in the Workbench configuration tool, you can create any types of tasks for data integrity you want, and they're relatively simple to create and implement. And finally, when data stewards are resolving data integrity issues in the registry, full audit and logging is applied. And with the right privileges, you can see a full audit trail of who did what, to which record, and when. And you can see here, you can see a snapshot. You can look at a record and say, what did it look like before an action was taken? What did it look like after? On the bottom, you can see what moved from what record to another. And in the middle, in the colored boxes, you can see who made the changes, what change did they make, and then you can view the change they made. And this is really, again, in keeping with privacy by design principles that have been laid out in Canada here by the privacy officer. There really is no privacy by design certification process. It's not really a standard. It is more a set of principles and guidelines, but we do believe that everything we put together meets those principles and guidelines and is in that spirit. Full reporting is provided. We have reports that come out. Again, beyond the time allocated for this demo with only about 5 minutes left, but something we would be very happy to demonstrate in person. There are a number of reports that you can get out of the box when we start the registry up, and you can set up any other kind of reports that you want. Here's a simple report of addresses per constituency in Manitoba. Once we loaded in the data, which we found publicly available, the report just generated. I'm going to quickly switch to the Business Process and Notifications Manager. The Voter Registry allows you to implement new processes and workflows very quickly. Like the Workbench application, demoing the Business Process and Notifications Manager takes time, and we'd love to do it if you'd love to see it. To introduce the functionality, here we have the Process Designer interface for creating a new business process, and we've done that. We've created one. Now, Business Analyst has created a new workflow, to deal with an objection from a potential voter. Using the tool and dropping tiles down, the analyst creates a process where the registry receives an objection. It determines who the returning officer is, sends that returning officer an email notification with a URL. The returning officer would click on the URL, which takes them to a login screen. Once they log in, it presents them with the objection's data. They would do their investigation and submit on another online forum their determination. That get routed back to an elections organization official's inbox, as I showed you in the task view. They would go to their inbox, open that, and review it, and they'd either approve it or send it back to the returning officer, perhaps for more clarification. Here's a second view of what the Business Process Manager tool looks like. If you remember earlier, we had that record from Elections Canada come in that was different in date of birth from the health record, and I said we could configure an exception report for that condition. Well, here in the bottom box, we're building that exception process. Again, you know, the business analyst would drag the workflow tiles down and say, here's how it would work. And then at the top, what you see is that's building the graphical user interface, or the screens that would be used in that business process. On the right-hand side, in the red circle, you can see how you can select components, such as drop-down boxes, buttons, and so on, and then you select actions that should happen to those drop-downs or buttons or whatever. Now, the benefit here is that building processes using this tool, you can build them in weeks, not months. And all of the screens, when you do this, are inside the process manager, so they have complete audit and logging built in. The audit and logging I showed you earlier would apply to these, where it would have that full audit trail of who did what, when, and where on all of these components in this process. I'm having trouble clicking the button. Here we go. Finally, I just want to demonstrate the web services and APIs quickly. What I'm going to do to demonstrate how easy it is to develop and deploy applications using the web services and APIs of our voter registry. The scenario is last term we took a first-year co-op student. We usually have 3 or 4 co-op students working here. We took one with 1 year of computer science, and we gave him 3 challenges. We said, 1, learn how the voter registry web services work. He also had to learn what web services are. 2, build a simple web application that someone can register to vote online, and when they do, they get a QR code from the registry that they can put in an iPhone wallet so they can bring it when they show up to vote. And 3, build a simple iPad app to show for a polling station voter how they would register and check in people on the night of the election, using that QR code you bring in on your iPhone. So let me show you very quickly what a first-year co-op student was able to achieve in about 1 month, with at least a week of that being a learning curve to learn the web services and learn how to work with the registry. You know, here we have a registration screen that he created. The Validate Address button actually takes the information that the person fills in, goes back to the registry, confirms the person, confirms the address, brings back the Canada Post standard address, and populates the screen. There are a number of screens that they created, but at the end you kind of get to this point where you say a new voter is added, and you get your QR code. And at this point you can print it out, and that's what you would bring in on election night, or you see there is a button there in the middle, Add to Wallet. And if you use the Add to Wallet button, it automatically takes the QR code and puts that, much like Air Canada or National Car Rental or anybody, puts it into your iPhone wallet for you to take on election day. So then we had the person build an iPad app, and here we have an iPad app where you have the login screen and you log in. There was a little code field there, so you could actually use something like RSA token externally or Google Authenticator if you wanted a third form of authentication. You log in, and the person created 2 functions. You can either register a new voter on election night at a polling station, or you can check in a voter. Under Register a Voter, they would click the Register button. Questions would come up. Are you a Canadian citizen? Are you 18 on election day? And have you resided in province X for X months or more on election day? If all three are answered yes, you move on to the next stage. It provides you a screen where you can fill in the demographics, the information required. You then confirm it all with the button at the bottom and you register. Of course, it asks you, are you sure? And a voter has been registered and a voter has been checked in. Now, what's interesting, if you went back to the records view for that person, you could see as a result of doing that at the polling station, it set the registered to vote and checked in to vote flags. We also have it set up, just to draw the point, that what we heard in the U.S. especially and in Canada is votes that are cast on election night where the person is registering at the polling station are often not counted immediately. So notice here we decided we're not going to set the eligible to vote flag yet. Instead, what we're going to do is when registrations come in on the night of the election from the poll book, the e-poll book, those will they will certainly be allowed to have their vote, to register and be checked in, but we'll create a custom task that would go to an elections official where they would have to look at every one of those in that inspector or stewardship application and approve them before the vote is counted. That makes it a nice automated process where the elections officials could go in, look at their task, have that graphical interface to see what the registration was, and if they approve it, eligible to vote is set and the vote is counted. Scan QR code. Well, pretty much the same. The person would come in to vote and have that QR code on their wallet. The polling worker would have the iPad and would now select Scan QR code. And basically, you would just take the phone on the iPad and you would scan the QR code that the voter is bringing in. That would go to the voter registry and bring all the information back for that voter that it found. You can see here we've set it up so you could make some changes. Maybe you could, maybe you couldn't, but here we changed 2 attributes. Then you confirm all of the demographic changes and you check them in. It says yes, and the voter has been checked in. So all of that was created by someone with very limited, or I would say new, computer programming skills, just using high-level, very descriptive web services that are available in the registry. And it, after the learning curve, probably took about 3 weeks. And I think we're showing that to highlight that things like building your own e-poll book or building new applications you want to use are very easy to do and can be quite powerful with the web services we have available. So finally, what I want to leave you with is, in terms of next steps, I've said a couple of times in the demonstration here that really a full demo where we have a working and running registry usually takes 2 to 3 hours if you've got business people and architects in the room. And we're more than happy to do that, either remotely through another webinar or on site. If you provide questions in advance, we can prepare better for the demo and we can show you far more of what I've shown today. The best return on investment is always seeing the impact of your data. So we have something called a quick start where they typically take 1 to 2 weeks. It's an engagement. We bring a working registry in on site. We take data that you've prepared in advance. We load your data into the registry and we present the results to you. You then decide if you move forward or not. We do it on site, no data leaves your premises, and we adhere to all your security policies and practices. In terms of how we deploy, there's always the traditional deployment method of taking the software and deploying it on-prem on your infrastructure. We also have 2 other ways we can do it. We have this built into an appliance. So the appliance offering says we take software, hardware, a lot of configuration and implementation, and we put 3 or 4 years of support into one number, and we deploy that on your premise. And you take on a role from that point forward as much or as little as you want. We can take on supporting it, we can take on AMS. The idea behind the appliance is to say if an election cycle is 4 years, we'll give you a 4-year number, all in total cost of ownership, and we'll put an appliance on site, and if you want, we'll manage it. Cloud hosted, we can do that. It's the same solution as the appliance, but we can also do a cloud version, and that can be a monthly fee model, software as a service. The hosting in the cloud, of course, removes the hardware requirement altogether. So it's exactly the top of the clock. That's our presentation, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you found it informative. I'll close now and thank Tim and Tyson for their help in this, and we'll open it up for questions.
Thanks so much, Brian. As I mentioned in the chat window to you guys a few minutes ago, if any of you have any questions, please type those into the chat window. We'd be happy to address those. And, oh, okay, a couple have come in. Here is a question for you, Brian. You showed Resolve ID as a part of the student registration process. Could that also be done as part of the DMV driver's license registration process?
Yes, it can. And in fact, we are doing that in the U.S. There is a legislation that came into effect in 2016, 2017 called Motor Voter. And what we can do with the Resolve ID widget is you can put that on top of a DMV registration screen, and as they go through the DMV process, kind of like the Elections Canada analogy on your tax form, you can have that, you know, do you consent to have this sent to the elections agency? And if they say yes, you could also capture the other 2 questions you might need and send that forward. So absolutely, you could do that.
Okay. And here is another question that came in. From the Data Steward Inspector tool, you showed us the management of the data. Is that done at the federal level, the provincial level, or the constituency level?
Well, it's a good question. It depends on who the customer is. If you were looking at this, which our example that I showed assumed that this was a provincial level registry. So provincially, you would be looking at, you know, your source systems perhaps being government departments. You might look at people who you're providing reports to or helping being municipalities or at the city level. If you were to take this up a level and imagine this at a federal level, perhaps at Elections Canada level, then the registry may look at the provinces, elections agencies being the sources coming in, perhaps Stats Canada, and at a federal level, the registry helping the provincial agencies with data integrity issues, looking for edge cases like finding a voter in 2 provinces, that kind of thing.
Excellent. And let's see, one last question. Again, if anyone else has any questions that you'd like to enter in, feel free to type those into the chat window. What possibly looks like my last question here is, to do validation for understanding citizenship, is there a way that IMT's voter registration tool could call out to validate, say, someone's passport or birth certificate?
Yeah, there are the capability to do what we call an identity engine call out exists. Again, back to those web services and APIs. If you're going to create an event trigger or if you're going to create any kind of a task, you can, as part of that, go out to an external system, data source, or whatever, and make that kind of a call. So I guess the answer would be yes, and that could be done either as when data is coming in, before you set an attribute like eligible to vote, you may make a web services call to another system and say, please validate or verify this. Or in the case of creating a workflow using the business process manager, part of that could be to, you know, when they ask or click a button to make that query and bring back something from another source. So I guess the answer would be yes.
Okay. Excellent. All right. If no one else has any questions at this time, you'll see posted on this last page of the presentation, info@imt.ca. As is customary with these types of events, the question may pop up 20 minutes from now, so please feel free to email us at info@imtca if you do have any follow-up questions, and we'd be happy to address those with you. Any closing thoughts from you, Brian?
No, I think I'm very happy that people were able to attend, and please contact us if you'd like to know more. We certainly have a lot more that we could demonstrate or show, and as I said, the on-site demonstrations or the quick start is especially is a very powerful way of saying if I load my data into it, I want to see what I get out of the identity engine, and I'd like to see what you can produce for reports and so on. But I just want to say thank you to everyone, and if there are no other questions, we can ask or call for questions one more time. If there aren't any, then people get a little part of their day back, and thank you very much.
Absolutely. So if there are any last questions, please feel free to type those in. I don't see anything new coming through. So thank you all so much, and we look forward to speaking with you in the future.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye now.
Bye now.